We got Miami Dolphins news to break down on today's episode because it was officially announced that Chris Grier has cut Raheem Mostert, the 3-year running back in Miami. His tenure comes to a conclusion. He's going to be 33 years old at the beginning of the season. And I will be honest, folks, if you have been with the channel for the entire offseason, this is why you subscribe, because we break down the news, but it also shouldn't surprise anyone that Mostert ultimately got released from this Dolphins roster. His usage rate went way down last season. Devon Achane carried most of the load in that backfield. They drafted a rookie, Jalen Wright, in the 4th round and used him in spot moments throughout the season. And the Dolphins being so much over the cap space that this will save Miami is ultimately just too good to pass up. So the 33-year-old Mostert and Miami ultimately part ways. And this is why you subscribe, because we will have you covered on all Miami Dolphins news. But we also made a video about a month ago labeling Dolphins cut candidates, and Mostert was our #1 guy because it was an inevitability, not really something that was in question. So make sure you do hit that sub button and join us here at Dolphins Today. But some of you might be asking why he did ultimately get cut, because he was relatively productive for Miami over the last 3 seasons after joining the Dolphins in 2022, former San Francisco 49ers. Well, cutting Mostert frees up $2.9 million in cap space, and I know $2.9 million doesn't sound that much, but when the Dolphins were already about 15 and change over the cap for 2025, any amount matters. And after this release of Raheem Mostert, the Dolphins are still over the cap by $12.9 million, which means Miami and Chris Grier are going to have to release more players and find different avenues to create cap space for the 2025 campaign. And don't forget, they still got to sign their draft class and sign exterior free agents or re-sign some players. So they're really going to get busy over the next couple of weeks making moves to create cap space for the Dolphins. And coming up later in the show, after we talk more about Raheem Mostert, we're going to have some other Dolphins cut candidates that we could see maybe get released this offseason, so stay tuned for that. But after the release of Raheem Mostert, the running back room is very, very clear at this moment. There is only 3 running backs on the roster technically. Alec Ingold obviously is considered a back, but he's a fullback. He's still under roster. But the Dolphins only have 2 running backs, Devon Achane and Jalen Wright. Those 2 will spearhead this running back room next season, and that was always going to be the case. Even if somehow Mostert remained on the roster for 2025, it was always going to be Achane and Wright leading the way, and then Mostert might be used in some spot moments if there's an injury to Wright or Achane or in short yard situations. But either way, it was time. The 33-year-old was not as good as he was in the past. This past season for Miami had some tough fumbles that we'll get to in just a second. And his yards per carry took such a dip, you had to wonder if his tank was just running on empty. But let me know, what was your one-word reaction to Raheem Mostert being cut when you saw that Ian Rappaport, that Adam Schefter notification that Mostert has been released from the Dolphins? What was your one word? Mine was expected, because I already treated in my head like Mostert wasn't on this team for 2025. Now, any other cut candidate that ultimately gets released could surprise me, because some of them aren't as big financial money savers. And if they are big money saves, it's like, whoa, you actually ultimately went through with that deal. But this is the one that made the most sense the entire way. And when you look at Mostert's 3-year tenure in Miami, it's been very, very good, right? He was very, very productive in 2022, in 2023, and then in 2024, he had a little bit of a down season. He only averaged 3.3 yards per carry. It was certainly disappointing for Raheem Mostert this past season after having a 18 touchdown and 1,000-yard season in 2023, and was actually selected to the Pro Bowl. So this is something that is a little bit of a surprise to see him go down so much, but we do appreciate Mostert for being so productive in the 2022 and 2023 seasons. But I do want to also remember some folks about this issue. Mostert cost Miami arguably 2 football games this season. On the road in Week 7 against the Indianapolis Colts, and then on the road in Week 9 against the Buffalo Bills. The Dolphins led, or at least were tied, in each of those 2 third quarters. And on the first possession of the second half, Mostert fumbled in Indianapolis. Mostert fumbled in Buffalo, and it turned the tide of the game. Miami was leading by a full touchdown against the Colts in Week 7. They fumbled. 3 plays later, the Colts score touchdown. Against the Bills, tie ball game. Dolphins fumble. Raheem Mostert loses it. Bills go right down the field, score a touchdown, take a lead, ultimately hold on to win that game. I don't want to blame it all on Mostert because it's a 22-player game, 53-player game, and there's a lot of moments throughout the game where it can change. But Mostert did cost Miami arguably 2 games this season, and if he doesn't fumble, I think they absolutely beat the Colts on the road, and I think they had a good chance to beat the Bills on the road, which guess what? Would have gotten you to 10 wins and ultimately in the postseason. The Dolphins just simply needed to move on. Mostert had a really good tenure in Miami, but it's simple. You get the cap space to $2.9 million. You also get more room for Achane and Jalen Wright to do their thing. Mostert getting up there in age and 33, it just made too much sense to move on. But when you talk about the future of this running back room, and before we get to some other Dolphins cut candidates, I would expect Miami to still add a running back. Listen, the Dolphins will not go into the training camp and preseason portion with only 2 guys under contract in that room that are actual running backs. They have almost 10, 11 picks in the NFL draft. I would expect one of them to be used on a running back once again. And I would also look to see if Dolphins acquire like maybe a UDFA or a super cheap veteran in NFL free agency that is costing you quite literally the vet min. The simple fact is they need a short yardage guy. Alec Ingold was maybe going to be used as a fullback dive type of guy, but I don't think he is that effective at that. You need a big physical running back that complements Jalen Wright, that complements Devon Achane, because those two are weapons, man. Wright's more physical than Achane is, but they both specialize with their speed, their ability to make the people miss with the ball in their hands after the catch in open space. But the Dolphins need to add a bruising running back. I will always box draft an RB in the 7th round. Miami has 4 7th-round picks projected right now. I would expect one to be used on an RB, maybe even one in round 5 as well. But they need to add a short yardage guy. Cam Scadaboo, anyone? It's an option out there. Maybe Phil Malfa from Clemson as well. And this is why you also subscribe. Not only are we breaking down the news around Miami on a consistent daily basis, but we will also have you covered with Dolphins rumors. And when other rumors pop up in free agency, the draft, we will have you covered. So hit that sub button to learn all things Miami Dolphins. All right, let's round out the show with this. Dolphins cut candidates because Miami clearly still over the cap by $12.9 million. They will need to make some moves to get into the green, not to just comply with NFL regulations, but also to help make additions to this Dolphins roster. I think the 5 biggest names that you should be keeping your eye on for, Bradley Chubb, number 1. The edge rusher, we've talked about him in depth this offseason. If you release him with a post-June 1st 1 designation, you save $19.5 million in cap space. Teron Armstead, you can save $15 million straight up if you do the same thing with him. Now, there are rumors about Armstead potentially retiring, so he could take the decision out of your hands, and you just designate that post-June 1st in their own right, and you save $15 million. But another couple interesting names here. Kendall Fuller. I don't think the Dolphins should release Kendall Fuller because when he played for Miami in his 11 games last season, he was really good. Him and Jalen Ramsey were a good boundary cornerback duo. Fuller under contract for 1 more season. I think it's worth keeping him around at his current price tag. $6.8 million is nice, but it would have to be post-June 1st. I don't know if it's worth it to release Fuller because then that leaves you a massive hole at CB2. So I would like to keep Fuller, but I do think it's a potential candidate for Miami since it would save $6.8 million. The other 2 little options, kind of similar to Raheem Mostert, are Durham Smythe, the tight end, and Jake Bailey. I've been very open about my desire of having Bailey off this team and the Dolphins looking to a cheaper free agent at the punter position or maybe even draft one on day 3. The savings of $1.9 million are too good to pass up for me for a average to below average punter in Jake Bailey. And Smythe, I think the Dolphins, who have both Julian Hill, Durham Smythe under contract behind Jonnu Smith, could go in a younger direction behind Jonnu Smith by drafting a tight end. And if the Dolphins have any plan of doing that with one of their 10 picks in the NFL draft, I think Smythe would be a solid cut candidate, saves you $2 million, and I don't think he provides you that much. Yeah, he's a solid run blocker, but he doesn't provide you anything in the passing game. These are the 5 names that I am keeping my eyes out for the most when it comes to future cut candidates because Miami still has to clean up $12.9 million in cap space. It can happen with restructures, can happen with extensions, but there also will be some casualties from this Dolphins roster, and those are 5 names that you need to keep an eye out for. And when those moves inevitably happen, we will have you covered with a video as well as any type of Miami Dolphins breaking news. So make sure you hit that sub button and join us here at Dolphins Today.